Thanks for taking the time today. We're going to spend the next 25 minutes looking at forklift incidents, not in an abstract way, but grounded in actual data. Why did these incidents happen? What conditions were present? And most importantly, what does the data tell us about how to prevent them? This isn't theoretical. We're working with thousands of incident reports from across the US manufacturing and distribution sector. So when we talk about root causes, we're talking about patterns we see repeatedly in facilities like yours. Why does this matter? Here's what the data shows. Thousands of forklift injuries and fatalities are occurring every year, both globally and in the United States. That's a big number. But here's what matters more. Over 70% of those are preventable. Not sometimes preventable, not maybe with training, but actually preventable. They're caused by mistakes that, with the right systems and awareness, don't have to happen. These aren't equipment failures or acts of God. These are mistakes made in real time, under pressure, maybe rushing to meet a quota, maybe distracted, maybe just misjudging the visibility. But here's the key. Because they're preventable human mistakes, they're addressable. We can't eliminate human nature, but we can design systems so that when someone makes mistakes, the consequences are contained or prevented. So that's what we're exploring today. It's not how do we blame the operators, it's how do we build systems so mistakes are less likely and less catastrophic. So here's the roadmap. First, we're going to look at the data, what's actually happening in the US, not speculation, real numbers from OSHA and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then from there, we're going to break down the 5 major accident categories. This is the heart of the entire seminar. For each category, we're going to look at what does the accident look like, why does it happen, what can management do, and what can technology do. The reason we split it that way, management and tech, is because there's no single solution. Both matter. Technology without good management becomes a checkbox. Management without technology relies too heavily on human consistency, which we all know is imperfect. Finally, we'll talk about how this applies to your operation specifically, and you'll have time for questions. So let's start with the data. Between 2011 and 2017, 614 workers lost their lives in forklift-related incidents in the United States. It's an average of around 87 deaths per year. To put that in context, that's more than the number of people who die in workplace falls from ladders and scaffolding combined. Most people think ladder falls are the biggest risk, but the data says otherwise. And these are permanent, irreversible outcomes. Someone's parent, child, or spouse didn't come home. And from a business perspective, which I know matters to you, each fatality usually triggers OSHA investigations and federal fines that can range from $15,000 upwards in excess of $160,000, as well as often civil litigation. What's important, these deaths are concentrated in specific accident types. They're not random. We'll see which ones as we move through the data, and that concentration is what makes prevention possible. Non-fatal incidents paint a different picture in terms of scale. Over 7,000 workers are injured annually, and many of these require time off of work. In 2017 alone, there were 9,050 recorded non-fatal forklift incidents or illnesses. These create real, quantifiable costs. Medical treatment, emergency room visits, ongoing physical therapy, and sometimes even surgery. Downtime, the worker's going to be out. You're going to be paying workers comp while production is also going to be impacted. Lost productivity. Say, for example, that person happens to have been your most efficient loading, manning your most efficient loading station, is now out for 13 days plus on average, plus ongoing disability. Someone often comes back after their time off, but they're not at full cap. And then there's the less tangible cost, morale impact. When a coworker gets hurt, everyone on site feels it. Safety culture either improves or deteriorates based on how you respond. This is where your team watches how seriously you take it. When you drill into what actually causes these fatalities, you'll see patterns. The top categories are struck by powered vehicles, forklift hits someone, hits the moving truck, hit by falling objects, loads that are dropping from height, falls from lower levels. Typically, the operator is thrown from the truck or falling while on it. Pedestrian vehicle collisions. person in the truck occupy the same space at the same time and lead to a collision. Off-road incidents, tips, rollovers in areas outside of normal warehouse traffic. Notice what's not on this list? Random equipment failures. Maybe 1 in 20, give or take, incidents involves a mechanical failure as the primary cause. The rest are all human factors. Someone's in the wrong place. Someone's moving too fast. Someone didn't see someone else. Someone didn't follow procedure. That's actually good news, though, because it means these incidents aren't random acts of God. They're predictable. And if they're predictable, we can design systems and procedures to prevent them. That's the fundamental insight that drives everything we're going to discuss. So a while back, I was at a facility in the Midwest, had about 12 pedestrian strikes in a year. We looked at the pattern. Every single one of those strikes happened in the same loading zone between 2 to 4 p.m. when the day shift and night shift overlapped. It wasn't random, it was predictable. Once they understood the pattern, they adjusted the scheduling and separated the traffic flows. That led to 0 strikes in the next 18 months. Beyond the immediate injury, there's also the operational impact. The average downtime per forklift incident is 13 days. Compare that to the average workplace injury, only 8 days. Forklift incidents are 60% longer downtime. That's significant. But here's where it gets worse. Pedestrian-related incidents, the most common type, have a median downtime of 20 days, nearly a month. During that month, what happens? If it's a critical area or key person, operations are constrained. You're either running at reduced capacity, pulling people from other areas to cover the gap. And the data shows us where the biggest volume is, 1,850 pedestrian collisions during transport. That's normal warehouse operations, loading zones, aisles, intersections. It's not edge cases. These are the routine areas where your operation runs every single day. So when you think about incident prevention, think about it in terms of operational resilience. Every prevented incident is 20 days of uninterrupted operation. Every prevented incident is your team at full capacity. That's the business case in operational terms. Say, for example, we have 5 incidents per year, 20 days downtime each. It's around 100 days of operational constraint. Even a 50% reduction in incidents means 50 days of reclaimed capacity. At your throughput rate, what's that worth in terms of revenue or cost avoidance? Now we're going to get specific. We're going to drill into the meat and bones. The data and incident patterns break down into 5 distinct categories. Each has a different root cause. Each requires different preventative approaches. And here's the critical point. Cannot solve all 5 with a single training program. There's no rubber stamping here. I know it sounds provocative, so let me explain. Say I run a mandatory all-hands safety training. So everyone's going to learn about speed limits, pedestrian awareness, load handling, all of it. That's good, right? Baseline awareness matters. But pedestrian strike prevention requires detection systems or traffic segregation that training alone can't provide. Overreach prevention requires hardware limits on the truck. Speed loss of control requires active speed management by area, not just quote unquote drive safely advice. So yes, training's necessary, but it's not sufficient. You need a layered approach. Training plus procedures plus environment design plus technology. Each layer catches what the other might miss. Think of it as a defense in depth or Swiss cheese model. Multiple layers, if one falls, the others are still protecting. Let's walk through each category one at a time. Traveling accidents. These are what they sound like. Incidents that happen when the forklift is in motion, moving from one point to another. A typical scenario is pretty straightforward. Operators moving, maybe at moderate speed or faster. They approach a turn or a ramp. They don't slow down enough. The truck either tips on the turn, rolls towards the side, or jackknifes if the mast is raised and there's a loadout height. What happens next? If the truck tips, the operator is getting launched. If there are bystanders nearby, they're getting hit by the truck or by flying pallets. If it's a ramp situation, the truck might slide backwards, lose its brakes. Consequences are all high energy. Collisions with fixed infrastructure like racks, loads falling from height, in some cases, the driver being ejected. These tend to be high velocity. The damage happens fast, and the injuries are often severe. A while back, I had actually visited a facility where an operator got into an incident. They took a corner too fast, around, I think it was 8 or 10 miles per hour, give or take. Truck tipped. The operator jumped and landed. Thankfully, they were okay, but 3 pallets fell, destroyed about $15,000 in product. Well, one of those pallets was destined for a high profile client. As a result, they lost that account. So as you can see, it's not just the impact, it's the aftermath that, is another thing to deal with. Oh wait, I just realized there's a quick video here.
Did you include the voice?
Seems like it doesn't want to include. It's just audio anyways. There's no voice associated with that one, but you guys get the gist.
Okay.
So a forklift center of gravity shifts when carrying a load, and especially when the mast is raised. On a turn, truck's going to want to tip outwards. If you're going too fast, centrifugal force exceeds the truck's stability threshold. It goes over, and you can't recover from that. So why do these happen? There's 4 main reasons, and they layer on top of each other. First, unsafe driving habits, low safety awareness. Operators are moving fast because they're on a rhythm. When you've done something 100 times safely at speed, your brain stops treating it as risky. It's commonplace. You default to that speed even when conditions change. You haven't built the habit of continuously slowing down for turns. It's not malice, it's just how human habits work. Second, many warehouses don't have designated routes or clear speed expectations by area. So operators make up their own speeds based on how fast can I go without obvious problems. It's not a standard though. That's just guessing. Third, management's not actively supervising or enforcing safe driving patterns. People aren't being coached. Behavior rather isn't being measured. So the safe habits persist unchecked. Fourth, the physical environment makes it harder for operators to judge what's safe. Poor lighting in corners, no clear markings showing the turn radius, no speed bumps or visual cues saying slow down here. You're asking operators to make good judgment calls in an environment that doesn't support good judgment. It's not one problem, it's 4, and all 4 usually exist in facilities where traveling accidents are common. So, what can management do? There's 3 concrete things. First, they can define clear driving routes through the warehouse. Not forklifts go everywhere, but specific paths that work with your physical layout. High-speed corridors in open areas. Lower speed zones in congested areas. Narrow aisles with restrictions. Map these out. Post them. Make them a standard. Second, set speed expectations for different areas. Not drive safely, but 5 miles per hour in the loading zone, 10 in an open aisle, 3 on ramps. Specific, measurable, and enforceable. Then add visual cues, floor markings, signs at transitions, speed bumps in areas where people tend to go too fast. These aren't punitive, they're reminders. Third, measure and coach driver behavior. Who's consistently exceeding speed limits? Who's taking corners aggressively? What's the pattern? Use that data for coaching. Hey, we noticed you're running 12 miles an hour in a 5 miles per hour zone. What's going on? Do you need a different route? You under time pressure? Let's fix this together. It's coaching. It's not punishment. The reason this works is simple. You're making safe behavior the path of least resistance. The default route is the safe route. The marked zones are where people naturally slow down. The coaching is feedback, not blame. On the technology side, you have 2 options that work together on this. First, they're speed limiters. These are going to set a hard maximum speed for the forklift. They cannot override it. You can program different speeds by area using geofencing. When the forklift enters the loading zone, it's automatically limited to 5 miles per hour. When it exits to an open corridor, unlocks to 10 miles an hour. The operator doesn't manually change settings. The system does it. Why this matters? Like I said, removes the operator's ability to override those safety limits, even under pressure. Even if someone's rushing because they're behind on quota, truck's not going to go faster than it's programmed in. It's a physical constraint. It's not a suggestion. Second, this is more sophisticated. Turning deceleration devices. These detect when the forklift is cornering and automatically reduces speed to keep the truck within safe stability limits. So the operator might be going 10 miles an hour down a corridor. If they approach a corner, the system detects the turn, reduces the speed to 4 to 5 miles for the corner, then accelerates back to normal. It happens automatically. The operator doesn't have to remember, the truck handles it. Why is this powerful? It's simple, really. It prevents the most common traveling accident scenario without requiring the operator to be perfect. Physics prevents the mistake. The second category, loading and unloading accidents. This is where the forklift is stationary or moving slowly while actively engaging with a load. The dynamics here are completely different from traveling accidents. Typical scenario, operator approaches a pallet, angles the forks wrong. It's at a level entry, now they're tilting and skewing. This creates an unstable load that shifts during lift, or they're stacking at height. It could be 10, 12, 15 feet up, and the stack's not level, the load's not balanced. One pallet shifts, and the whole stack can collapse. Or say the ground is uneven. It's going to throw off the truck's stability, and a heavy load will tip the truck. Consequences are simple and dire. If a load falls from 12 feet, it's falling with significant energy. Anything in the impact zone, whether it be equipment, people, it's getting hit. Or the falling load shifts suddenly and the truck tips. In the worst case, someone is standing close to or under the load when it falls. These tend to be slower motion incidents than traveling accidents. They happen over seconds rather than fractions of a second, but the consequences are just as severe. A falling pallet of product can seriously injure someone. A truck tipping can eject the operator outright. So why do these happen? There's 5 contributing factors. First, operators aren't always angling the forks correctly when entering a load. It's harder than it looks to get 2 forks perfectly level and centered. That's the reality. One fork goes in first, the load tilts slightly. The operator doesn't realize it. They lift, and the imbalance just begins to compound. Second, inadequate training on stacking procedures. How high can you stack different types of pallets? What's the weight limit? How do you arrange pallets so the load is stable? Most operators don't have a systematic way to think about this. They stack based on experience or habit, not rules and guidelines. Third, loading areas are often congested. Pallets stacked haphazardly on the floor, unclear zones. Where is it safe to stack? Where do forklifts operate? People working close to the truck. It's chaotic. In chaos, mistakes happen. Fourth, there's no spotting system or clear communication. One person should be directing the operator, left a bit, forward, stop, lower. Instead, the operator is left to guess. If a bystander is in the way, nobody communicates it clearly. Fifth, management hasn't thought it through the loading risk. Which loads are safe for which trucks at which heights? For different forklift models, weight limits change. For different pallet types, stackability changes. Without a documented standard, every operator figures it out on their own. Management solutions. So there's 3 things. First, create standardized loading and unloading procedures. Document them. For each type of load, each pallet type, each truck model, what's the right way to do it? Fork angles, load arrangement, stacking height limits. Get your best operators together. Document their processes. Then train everyone to that standard. Now it's not a guessing game. It's a solidly identified procedure. Second, clearly mark loading zones and pedestrian paths. Paint the floor. post signs, make it obvious. This is the loading zone. That's the pedestrian path. This is the emergency route. People and equipment get separated. Communication happens based on clear zones. Third, implement a high lift speed limiter. This is a device that restricts how high the forks can lift and how fast the lifts move based on the load weight. So if the truck senses it's carrying a heavy load, automatically slows the lift. If you try to lift something 15 feet when the safe limit for that load is 12, system's going to stop that lift. Wow. Again, physics prevents the mistake. The third category, pedestrian interactions. This is where the forklift and people occupy the same space, and that's where things go wrong. Think of a typical scenario. Pedestrians walking through the warehouse, maybe on their way to a restroom or break room. They're not paying attention. They wander into a lane where a forklift is operating. The operator doesn't see them because the load is blocking forward vision or the angle's wrong. Boom. Now you've got a collision on your hands. Or there's mixed traffic, people and equipment in a loading zone with no clear rights of way. Someone assumes the forklift will slow down, or the forklift operator assumes the person will move. They don't. Contact and collision. Or the operator reverses to reposition without a spotter, doesn't see someone behind the truck. Consequences are simple. If a pedestrian gets struck by a forklift, the outcome ranges from minor bruises to crush injuries to fatalities. A pedestrian struck by a 4,000-pound vehicle moving at 5 miles an hour is still a significant impact. If someone's getting pinned, the consequences are severe. Even if the pedestrian isn't injured, the impact on the operator is serious. They've hit someone. That's traumatic. That's the reality of it. Operationally, now you have an incident investigation, potential downtime, and potential regulatory scrutiny. A while back, I'd been at a client site. I'd met an operator who'd been with the company for going on 12, 13 years. He had a perfect record, but one afternoon, a new temp had walked through his lane without looking. They ended up impacting just because his view was obstructed and she wasn't paying attention. Thankfully, she was fine, just shaken up. The operator, though, was devastated. He felt guilty for weeks. This had been something that he managed to avoid for his entire career, and now out of nowhere, boom. It impacts people emotionally, not just operationally. So, why do pedestrian incidents happen? There's 5 reasons, again. Most warehouses don't physically separate pedestrian paths from forklift lanes. Everyone moves through the same space. Pedestrians walk where they want, when they want. Forklifts drive when they need to. They intersect. There's no clear buffer. Second, there's no communication system. Who has the right of way? When do people cross? When do forklifts move? Without explicit rules, the reality is everyone's going to assume differently. Third, pedestrian awareness is often low. People assume they're going to see a forklift coming or the forklift will see them. The reality is visibility is limited. People duck under masts, they're distracted, they misjudge. Awareness training helps, but it can't prevent all incidents. Fourth, minimal active traffic management. Supervisor isn't watching the loading zone. Lane violations aren't corrected in real time, so unsafe patterns persist and thrive. Fifth, there are no systems to detect when a pedestrian enters a blind spot. The operator has limited visibility. If there's no tech alerting the operator, hey, someone's 8 feet to your left in your blind spot, they're not going to know that person's there until it's too late. So on the management side of things, there's 3 concrete things that can be done. First, create physical separation, dedicated pedestrian paths. Actually mark them, actually enforce them. Yellow lines on the floor, signs saying pedestrian path. Train people. You cross at marked crossings, not in forklift lanes. And train operators. Pedestrians have the right of way in marked paths. Give them space. Second, develop explicit traffic rules. Which direction do forklifts go in the main aisle? Where do people cross? When do pedestrians move? When do forklifts move? Write these down, Post them. Make them consistent. Ambiguity causes accidents. Clarity prevents them. Third, train the whole team on signaling and communication. Spotters should be using hand signals. Operators should be using their horns. Everyone understands what a 3-beep horn means versus continuous honking. Everyone knows a spotter's jobs. These are practical skills. Train them, reinforce them, and measure them. The theme here is simple. You're designing the environment and the rules so that safe behavior is the default. You're removing ambiguity. You're making it easy for people to do the right thing. Technology offers two complementary approaches. Which one you choose depends on your facility's dynamics. The first, ultra-wideband systems. Everyone, operator and pedestrians, will wear a wristband or tag. The system tracks the location in real time. When a pedestrian enters too close to a forklift, the system alerts both the operator and the pedestrian through haptic feedback. The operator feels it, slows down, watches for the person. The pedestrian feels it also and knows to move away from the lane. Advantages on this are simple. It's high accuracy. It's got active tracking with real-time alerts. The only disadvantage, though, is everyone has to wear a device. If someone forgets their wristband, that's a hole in the system because it can't track them. It's better for facilities where fixed staff are trained on the system. Second option is AI collision avoidance. Cameras on the truck with AI software that recognizes pedestrian in the field of vision. When a person enters the truck's path or approaches too close, system alerts the operator. There's no wearable required. It's better for facilities with high turnover, visitors, or temporary staff where you can't mandate them wristbands. Limitations. Visual recognition can be affected by strong lighting, occlusions, so it's good. It's not perfect. The best approach in many facilities? Honestly, both. UWB for your core staff, AI vision for the loading areas, where temporary staff or visitors move through. It's a layered protection approach. The fourth category, facility collisions. The truck hits the building, racks, columns, walls, structural elements. Why does this happen? It's simple. Operator might misjudge spacing in narrow aisles. There's an 8-foot aisle, truck's 5 feet wide. The operator doesn't realize they're drifting towards the edge. They scrape a rack, or they reverse to reposition, can't see what's behind them, boom, support column. Or they operate the forks incorrectly and they catch something. Consequences are simple. If racks hit hard enough, structural integrity is compromised. A racking system that may have been rated initially to hold 10,000 pounds might now be unstable. If product is stacked on that rack and it falls, loads are going to fall, or the structural damage has weakened the building itself. Now you have long-term safety risks that cost thousands to repair. There's also immediate equipment downtime. The forklift itself might have been damaged. Forks bent, hydraulic lines cracked. The reality is it's going to leave the facility or the equipment out of service for repairs. And if the damage is visible, OSHA is going to come knocking. And that's going to open an entirely different can of worms. You might ask yourself why this matters beyond obvious damage. In my eyes, it's clear as day. Cracked weld on a support column from a forklift hip might not be visible, but it's weakened. 6 months later, under normal load, it could just fail. That's a catastrophic failure incident. It's not just a minor, a collision. It is any HSE or warehouse manager's nightmare. So why do these kind of collisions happen? There's 5 factors, once again. Physical layout. Narrow aisles make it harder to judge spacing. If you've got high bay racks and tight aisles, the margin for error is small. Second, operators haven't been trained in spatial awareness. How much clearance do they actually have? Where are the tight spots? What's their truck's turning radius? Without that knowledge, they're guessing. Third, there aren't clear markings. Yellow lines showing safe paths, red lines showing no-go zones, arrows indicating turn restrictions. Without visual guidance,
Operators make mistakes. They're only human. Fourth, lighting is often poor in back areas. If you can't see the corner clearly, you're operating blind. Blind spots exist in every warehouse. That's the reality. A column obscures the view around a corner. Tall rack blocks sight lines. Fifth, there's no structured facility protection policy. Nobody inspects the racks weekly for damage. Nobody documents what's been hit before, or any hits that have occurred are ghosts events. Nobody communicates, hey, this rack is damaged, stay clear. So the damage ends up accumulating and eventually compounding. So management might be asking yourself, what can we do? There's four things. First, if possible, redesign for safety. Wider aisles reduce congestion. Reroute traffic away from structural columns. It requires capital investment, but sometimes it's worth it. If you're constantly hitting the same corner, maybe rerouting is the long-term solution to put an end to that. Second, mark safe routes and turning points clearly. Paint lanes, use arrows, use turn left here indicators, make the safe route obvious. Operators at different skill levels can follow marked routes. Third, train operators on spatial awareness. Truck is 5 feet wide. Aisle is 8 feet. Your turning radius is 6. In this corner, you have 18 inches of clearance. Here's how to judge it. Real skills for real spaces. Not abstract, but specific to your facility layout. Fourth, establish a weekly facility inspection routine. Whether it be, like I said, whether weekly or bi-weekly, really comes down to your workflow. Do walkthroughs, inspect those racks, columns, walls for damage from previous hits. Document it, communicate it. Rack D4 was hit last week. It's repaired now, but operators should know it was damaged. Be extra careful. And if damage is structural or significant, again, this one's simple to me. Restrict the use until it's properly repaired. The theme is that you're making the facility communication clear and continuous. So, technology, 3 approaches that work together on this. First, physical barriers, bollards around support columns. They're designed to absorb that impact without damaging the column. Barriers around valuable equipment. These are passive. They sit there, they take the hit instead of your infrastructure. Second, collision warning systems using radar. Sensors on the truck detect when it's approaching an obstacle, whether it be a wall, a rack, a column. If the operator is closing in at speed, the system provides an auditory alert, warning, obstacle ahead. Doesn't stop the truck. It can, but it doesn't. But it alerts the operator so they can slow down and take control. Third, recording systems. CCTV or telematics. Cameras in the warehouse and on the truck that record incidents. Why, you might ask? Simple. When a collision happens, you can review the footage. What was the operator doing? What was the environment? What went wrong? That's coaching material. Over time, you see patterns. Every time there's heavy product in that truck, operators are hitting that corner. Tells you that something, maybe the load impacts the visibility or that specific corner needs better markings. Recording is data for continuous improvement. And fifth, final category, mechanical failures. These are less common than the other incident types, but when they happen, they're catastrophic because the operator is losing control. It could be brake failure. The operator reaches for the brake, nothing happens. Truck keeps moving. Could be a hydraulic failure. The lift loses pressure. Load drops uncontrollably. Tire failure. Tires cracked. Truck becomes unstable. Fork deformation. Forks are bent or cracked and they collapse under load. In each scenario, the operator suddenly has a truck that's not responding as expected. That's high risk. When mechanical failures happen, the results are immediate and severe. Loads fall. The truck could be unstoppable. Operator can't brake. Injuries or death occur. Production shuts down. Repairs are expensive. Depending on what failed, the truck might be out of service for weeks, not days. So, the why on this? 4 reasons. First, maintenance schedules aren't followed consistently. Trucks are due for maintenance, but they're busy. We'll get to it next week, you say. Next week becomes next month. the truck keeps on running, but key components keep on wearing also. Second, critical components wear out but aren't replaced proactively. The brake is getting sluggish, but it still works, so why bother with downtime to replace it? Simple. An aging brake is likely to fail catastrophically. Preventative replacement is cheaper than reactive emergency repair after failure. Third, operators notice warning signs, strange sounds, sluggish response. We've all heard them from our cars, right? But they ignore them or they don't report them. They're trained to report issues, but in a busy shift, people are going to let things slide. I'll mention it later. That reality is later never comes. Fourth, management doesn't have a system to track component wear and predict failure. You don't know which trucks are at risk. You're reactive, waiting for failure instead of proactive, preventing it before it even occurs. Here's the thing. Mechanical failures are the most predictable of all. Components degrade in known ways. Maintenance schedules are based on operating hours and wear patterns. If you follow the schedule, failures drop dramatically. So, on the prevention side of things, 4 layers. Scheduled maintenance is non-negotiable. That's first and foremost. Every truck gets a major inspection every 500 operating hours or monthly, whichever comes first. Hydraulic fluid should be tested, brakes should be inspected, and tires should also be examined. Forks should be measured for cracks. It's not optional. Budget it, schedule it in, and do it. Second, pre-shift inspections. Every operator should be checking the brakes, hydraulics, tires, forks, and battery, if it's electric, before moving the truck. It shouldn't be a cursory glance, should be an actual checklist. No pencil whipping. It takes all of 5 minutes. Something's wrong, the truck should sit until it's fixed. That's your first line of defense. Third, condition monitoring. Track key metrics over time. How is the brake response degrading? Is the hydraulic pressure slightly lower each week? Is tire wear accelerating? With this data, you can predict failure before it happens. Truck A's truck brake response is at 80% normal. Schedule it for maintenance before it drops further. That's predictive maintenance. And fourth, enforcement. If a pre-inspection isn't completed, the truck does not move. No exceptions. Make it habitual. Make it non-negotiable. So that's the breakdown of the 5 major accident categories. Each has a distinct root cause. Each requires different approaches, whether it be management, environment, tech, or training. Together, they create a system where incidents drop significantly. So I know I've been talking everyone's ear off. I'd love to take an opportunity to open this up for questions. What's resonating with your facility? What kind of challenges are you guys experiencing right now that we may or may not have addressed? Where are y'all seeing the biggest opportunity for improvement? Seems like I've left you all speechless. Not a bad thing, don't worry. All right, so we've also put together a resource pack that's actionable for your team. Safe operation videos, show them to your team. Daily inspection checklists, post them by each truck. Operators should be using them every morning. Operator training manual, comprehensive coverage of safe practices, and a maintenance plan. Tells you what to inspect, when, and how. If you want to see these systems in practice, speed limiters, detection systems, identifying pedestrians, telematics, showing you how collisions are recorded and giving you metrics on all your operators, I'm happy to arrange a demo with you guys. I can show you real scenarios specific to your warehouse layout. Most importantly, I'd love to know, what are your 3 biggest risks? What's your incident history telling you? What would an integrated system add the most value? These are conversations worth having. Does anyone have any questions before I close things out? Again, seems I've left everyone speechless. Excellent. Well, without further ado, I really appreciate all of you sitting in, taking the time out to learn about what what I was chatting with you all about. I'll send over a follow-up email to everyone, just thanking you for your attendance. If for any reason there are any questions, don't hesitate to reply to that email. Happy to host a demo, discuss any of the solutions that were mentioned within this. Honestly, it's been a pleasure. You guys have been a very receptive audience.
Clearly captivated. So enjoy the rest of your days, and thanks again.